conversations changed? Have they shifted? Have they stayed the same?
Yeah, definitely. Now that it's legal, my relationship with my parents somehow has elevated, but I just thought of that now. And yeah, so I say that because, like you, my experience growing up, it was very negative. My parents were they were very ignorant to it, but what they knew was it was illegal, and what they thought was it's a poison. It will cause lung infections. You will become a troubled individual. You'll become a criminal. It's a gateway to homelessness and addiction. It's like they were completely ignorant to it and not wanting to learn about it. So, like I said, I started at 13. So, considering my early introduction, I was able to be very discreet about it for many years until 2016, when I decided I needed to speak up during the cannabis business licensing in Vancouver, the public hearings. And my parents were visiting, and I was out for dinner with them, and I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I have to go." They're like, "Where are you going?" And then I decided it was time to stop lying. I guess I was 33 years old. It's time to not hide this from my parents, and just be completely honest. Well, I'm going to go speak to mayor and council about how they can improve cannabis city or cannabis bylaw licensing in Vancouver to ensure that patients have access to medicine. That's where I was at in life. And that was met with almost relief. My parents were like, they were surprised that I would keep a secret from them for so long. They were surprised that I thought that they would be embarrassed by me, that they wouldn't accept me. They were more than accepting. Now my mother is the one on, posting on it. Facebook and Instagram, talking about it, educating her friends, making me work on my days off, talking to her friends.
Of course.
Sending me articles about research and patients and investing. So yeah, it's been a completely supported thing in my house or in my family's, I guess I should say group chats, because we all live in different places. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And it's even gone international with the rest of my family, like doing the exact same thing, posting things on their Facebook from Germany and Philippines and New Jersey.
That's incredible. It's interesting how cannabis has been able to kind of bring your family together, it seems, kind of like from all different corners of the world, or at least it's kind of like this common thing that you can at least talk about every once in a while. Sometimes some folks might be open to learning more about it, but they all know that Emmy is the person to like turn to, that they're like...
Last time I went home, I remember singing karaoke in my parents' house with their friends. And, as we're passing the mic, we're also passing the vape pen. And my parents didn't partake, but the fact that I got to do that with, their friends and family, it meant a lot.
Yes. Oh, yeah, those small victories. Oh, my goodness. Yeah, that's the best. No, I hear you. That's when, you've come for a circle and things are kind of normalized. If you can consume cannabis in the presence of your family and not have them, like, kind of bring the wrath of God out.
There's more acceptance. They want me to be comfortable being who I am, doing what I do, and not hesitating around them. If I need to go take a walk and go smoke one because I'm trying to be, not rude in the house when they're visiting, my mom will be like, "Oh, why don't you just use your bong and you can just blow it out the window?" Like, she knows to consider it, and I'm so proud of them. Yeah.
Oh, that's so good. Oh, I'm so glad. Destigmatizing, like, one nanay and tata at a time. I love it. A lot of like our connectivity, personal connectivity is kind of like, our our interests and kind of our commitment to kind of exploring our indigenous Filipino roots. And kind of on that same breath, earlier this month, on August 9th, it was actually International Day of the World's Indigenous Peoples. Now, on that same breath, some of our listeners might be interested to learn that the native people of the Philippines do actually have a really long history of being colonized by many, many, many outsiders. Like, I don't think we're going to go into that. That's like a topic for like a whole other episode. But I do want to share this excerpt posted on the UN website that says, Indigenous peoples are inheritors and practitioners of unique cultures and ways of relating to people and the environment. They have retained social, cultural, economic, and political characteristics that are distinct from those of the dominant societies in which they live. Despite their cultural differences, Indigenous peoples from around the world share common problems related to the protection of their rights as distinct peoples. Indigenous peoples have sought recognition of their identities, their way of life, and their right to traditional lands, territories, and natural resources for years. Yet throughout history, their rights have always been violated. Indigenous peoples today are arguably among the most disadvantaged and vulnerable groups of people in the world. The intersectional community, the international community now recognizes that special measures are required to protect their rights and maintain their distinct cultures and way of life. When I read that, I was super moved. I felt like it was a really good kind of description of kind of, you know, what has happened to Indigenous people and what continues to happen to them in different pockets of the world today. And I think, Emmy, that we can both agree that we wouldn't be like working in cannabis if we didn't believe in its inherent ability to like do good for the world, right? Like, I don't know, I've always truly viewed cannabis as a beacon for good, and like if harnessed properly, it has the ability to create like major social, economic, environmental, global change, right? So I guess my question is, as immigrants, as settlers, as folks not originally from this country, from Canada, how do we, like cannabis professionals, how do we harness our immense privilege of working in this emerging, soon-to-be billion-dollar industry to support Indigenous communities, to support Indigenous populations, and to support Indigenous businesses to succeed in the Canadian cannabis space?
Definitely. It's funny you asked that too, because we also asked a very similar question when I applied to the BC Compassion Club Society, which is, it's something like, how do you respond if someone were to ask you how you feel about living and working on unceded Coast Salish territory? And for those listening, that is the traditional lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people of this land, known as Vancouver, BC. When I first encountered that question, I think my answer is very similar to now, is that, except at that time I had to Google to see what that even meant and decide where I stand on that. And so what I found was I've been educated to a certain level and I can appreciate what I've learned, but I need to learn more, and I need to always share whatever I've learned. So we are at a really unique time in the world where collective consciousness is shifting. People are realizing what I had realized, that if we want to grow as humans, to self-actualize, we need to shut up and listen, like really listen. We can listen within ourselves and learn to connect our bodies and listen to each other and learn to connect to each other. And when our opinions are needed or requested or compelled to share, we're at a time when people are making space and building platforms for us to hear us. As people with privilege, we need to continue educating ourselves and sharing that knowledge. And what that means to me is creating more of that collective conscious shift so that people can bring that awareness to their communities. And it feels very vague what I'm saying, but I hope it makes sense.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. No, absolutely. Yeah, no, I think if I'm understanding correctly, it sounds as though you're saying that we have like a huge responsibility and kind of we have a huge responsibility to learn and to ask and to listen because we're in a position of privilege. I don't know. I'm kind of reminded of like the Spider-Man quote, and it's not actually Spider-Man. My husband always tells me it's Uncle Ben who said, with great power comes great responsibility, right? And, if privilege is considered power, and if we have like, the privilege of being in this space and to kind of like, to kind of have that knowledge, we should kind of harness that responsibility to do good.
Definitely.
Yeah. And of course, like, to be able, I guess I just kind of want to repeat your point to shut up and to listen, right? And to, to kind of, to provide that platform and to, yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say when I was thinking about like questions like this, or answering questions like this, I was thinking about how I can take cues from the cannabis plant herself and how that has affected the way I move through this industry, like or daily life even, like how. I sort of personified it in cannabis being grounded and rooted and in its own strength and firm truths, like the facts that can be proven scientifically, which I will include anecdotal because healing and medicine existed long before organized Western medicine. But yeah, that all of that truth is what is foundational to, what was foundational to making cannabis legal. Those were the words that allowed people to say to themselves, okay, I can acknowledge that this is more than an illegal substance, and give people the option to think about it in another way. And then continue to grow upwards with that and spread that truth that you've absorbed through your roots and spread that knowledge like leaves unfurling and flowers blooming, because there's so many topics to cover that people don't even talk about, like cannabis as a tool for harm reduction. I mean, lots of people do talk about the science and art of growing and production, but it's very like nerdy circles that are really into it. But I think if we could make that like more inspired to people who are interested in cannabis, they will realize the depth of knowledge to share, and then let alone cultural histories, political histories, medicinal histories, sacramental, all of it. It's such a deep plant, so there's a lot to share and a lot to know. I feel like I also didn't. I wanted to answer part of how we can use our privilege to support Indigenous communities as well. Something really important to me, as a lot of my community are made up of Indigenous folks and people working in front line in solidarity with Indigenous folks. Pinoy's working in solidarity in the front lines. So I'm pretty proud to say that. I know people who are supporting on that level. But for me, in terms of cannabis, my office, for instance, we're going to be moving to a new space on the downtown east side, across from Pigeon Park. Supposedly the poorest postal code in Canada, they say. And where many of our neighbors are the very people who've been displaced from this land, their land. So there are a lot of organizations and groups in the neighborhood that I want us to create genuine relationships with, in introducing ourselves. Hey, we're your new neighbor. We're a vertically integrated prohibition era cannabis company, publicly traded cannabis company, which, in and of itself already sounds like we are a successful company, which, in the minds of most people equates to money. So we're going to be there asking,